Hello, Chemistry 10HH students. This is Mrs. Altman. We are on video number 2, Chemical Foundations Part 2. Here are our objectives for today's video. We're going to be talking about significant figures in today's video. Pause here. Right, so significant figures, you're going to hear me call them sig figs. These are digits that are from a measurement that are measured by the observer. So these are going to include both certain and uncertain digits. But the important thing about significant figures is that placeholder zeros are not necessarily significant because they may have come from a unit conversion. So if you just measure something as 3 kilometers and then you convert it to meters and all of a sudden it's 3,000 meters, you didn't measure those zeros. So just because something is significant doesn't necessarily, just because something is important doesn't necessarily mean that it is significant. So significant means that it has been measured. Pause here. So here are the rules for counting significant figures, and we're going to be looking at examples with this. The first, which is very easy to remember, anything that's not 0 is going to be significant. The second is that there's going to be 3 types of zeros. So the first is a leading 0. I'll give you an example of one. So in the 0.0042, those zeros are what's called leading zeros, and those are not significant. So this right here would have 2 significant figures. The second is going to be captive zeros. So for example, the 2 zeros between the 4 and the 2, those are significant. So that will be 4 significant figures. And then there are 2 different types of trailing zeros. The first will be a trailing 0 that occurs after a decimal. Those are going to be significant. So 42.00, that has 4 significant figures. And then there's another type, which occurs when you have trailing zeros that happen before a decimal. These are not significant. They usually come from unit conversions. That's the reason why. The next rule is really that if you need to specify that a 0 is significant, you can put a bar over it or a decimal. You saw me do the decimal in the last video. That was the reason why. And then constants have no impact on sig figs. So 7 pi has 1 significant figure. The constant has no impact on it. More on that later when we get to unit conversions. Pause here. So I'll work through it, but feel free to fast forward to check your work if you feel pretty confident. All right, so this has 1 and 2 both count, and then we've got 2 trailing zeros after a decimal. So that has 4 sig figs. The next one has 1 significant figure because there's only 1 digit there. The next one has 2. And then the next one, this one has 2 sig figs. The reason why is the 3 zeros leading up to the 4 are not significant because they're leading zeros. And then we have a trailing after a decimal. These are leading because there is nothing before the decimal. If there was something before it, then they would become trailing zeros. Let's also go ahead and try example 3 as well while we're here. So this one has 3 significant figures. The zeros leading up to the 1 are leading zeros, and then the ones after it are trailing after a decimal. 480 has 2 significant figures. That 0 is trailing before a decimal. C has 3 significant figures. That dot right there makes the 0 significant. And then this one right here has 4 significant figures. The bar makes that 0 second from the right significant, and that makes all the zeros between that and the 5 captive zeros, which makes that have them significant. Pause here. So we're going to round this number to a certain number of significant figures. This is going to be a very, very important skill. Right. So I'm trying to round 130,000.0092 to 1 significant figure. That means I can only have 1 non-zero digit. So it becomes 100,000. I don't put any dots or any decimals because that would make 0 significant. Then the next one, I could have 2 non-zero digits, so I include the 130. If instead of 130,000, this had been like 180,000, my first one would have been 200,000. Now, 3 significant figures. I want to show that that 0 is significant, so I have to put a bar over it. Then for 4, more or less the same. And then for 5, I could either put, oh no, that would be for 6, more or less the same as well. So that bar can show significant. Rounding to number sig figs is going to be very, very important as we move on to unit conversion. So we've got to make sure that we're solid on this. Thank you so much for watching and have a great night.